404 error. What did they do?
Apparently,
Rabbi Levine.
oh,
There's a lot.
Jonathan is on. That's
You're getting
nice.
a 404 error when they put in OU.org/conversations.
How wonderful. I tell
I
you,
don't
it
know.
was
I guess when they're
worthwhile
clicking on the link.
after just seeing all these Rabbi's calendar, after only seeing all these faces and all these names, you can turn it off now. I'm happy. I really feel filled with joy. I forgot all the things I was going to say. Harold Road, they're wonderful.
I'm sure it will come back to you.
I don't know. I'm too busy thinking of you and Eskins. Goodness gracious, Mike.
Say hello, babe.
Good to vach, everybody. Shavua Tov. I imagine that we're now going to go into somewhat of a mute mode. I think Rabbi Pardo is the host, so I think Rabbi Pardo is going to make Rabbi Levine and myself the co-hosts. But I think everybody.
I apologize for muting you. There's definitely some sort of rabbinic joke to be made.
Right. Okay. Listen, that's the easiest way to keep me quiet, I suppose. But fortunately, I figured out how to unmute myself, and I see the same is true, Baruch Hashem, for Rabbi Levine. So, Shavua Tov, and welcome. I want to thank Rabbi David Pardo of the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America, the OU, for his work in general at the OU and working to disseminate Torah through many Torah programs. And Rabbi Pardo is the one who initiated the OU Conversations program in general, a great way to spend a Motzei Shabbos. And I am fortunate and privileged to have been asked by him through his professional colleague, my wife, to do this. And I have to say, I cannot tell you how overjoyed I am to be doing this. Very often when asked to do things via Zoom, I'm not particularly excited. I'm, as the saying goes, I'm eisgezoomt, but to be together with Rabbi Levine in any fashion is really an honor and a privilege. And I think that we'll have a very exciting program. I also want to give a special shout out to Rabbi Levine's daughter, Becky, who was so kind to take care of the technical issues on our end. As I think we all know, that because of the obligations of social distancing and the need to wear masks, we have understandably not always been able to see one another. And therefore, I'm going to encourage you, if you can, to, if you have video capacity, turn it on so that we can see your lovely faces, that other people can see you. We miss seeing one another. And even if we can't do it in person, this is a little bit of an opportunity. So I was advised that if I gave a proper introduction to Rabbi Levine, it would span more than the duration of this program. So I'm going to try to contain myself and provide somewhat of a limited biography of Rabbi Levine, especially for those who are not from our community and who don't have the privilege, like we do, of knowing Rabbi Levine, to provide a very, very brief introduction. Rabbi Levine was born in Eretz Yisrael, and his birth and his name, something we'll get to a little bit later, is in itself a beautiful story. And ultimately, at a very young age, I think 9 months, ended up going to England, where his other grandparents, his grandparents in Eretz Yisrael, were well-known Rabbi and Rabbi Aryeh Levin. Rabbi Aryeh Levin is our Rabbi Levine's grandfather, and our Rabbi Levine's father was a great Talmud Chacham, Chaim Yaakov Levine, and there are many Shmidman Levine connections. One of the many is the very, very close relationship between Rabbi Levine's father and my grandfather. In fact, there was a famous biographer in Yerushalayim, Aryeh Levin, who wrote biographies of many people, and he wrote a brief biography about my grandfather. And the one person he quotes in this brief biography is Rabbi Levine's father. And our connection to Rebbe Levine is a very, very strong connection. My grandfather was the Masada Kedushin of her parents, so it's like a tremendous connection that we have. But Rabbi Levine ended up going to England, and his father ended up coming to America, returning to Israel. In those days, Palestine was not a possibility, so his father went to America. Ultimately, was a Rosh Yeshiva and a Rav in Seattle for 3 years, Seattle, Washington, and then moved to Jersey City. Our Rabbi Levine and his family came to America, and our Rabbi Levine, at the tender age of 11 years old, entered into the Tel Yeshiva in Cleveland. Was ultimately educated in Tarvadas and Beis Aryeh. He has smicha from Tarvadas. He has smicha yodin yodin from his illustrious grandfather, Rabbi Avraham Levene. He has smicha from Rav Henkin, from Rav Siegel, who was the honorary president of the OU. He has a master's in religious education from Yeshiva University, a master's in guidance and counseling from NYU, and Rabbi Levine served as the Rosh Yeshiva of the Rogerson Yeshiva High School, and he was the Rav of Congregation Sons of Israel in Jersey City. And when he came to our shul, Lower Merion Synagogue, let's just put it this way: mainline Philadelphia was not generally considered to be hospitable to Jewry, and certainly not to Orthodox Jewry. And Rabbi and Rebbe Levine did an amazing job of becoming the Rabbi and Rebbe of a house shul, and they were able to build that house shul into the largest Orthodox congregation in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. A tremendous tribute, and Rabbi Levine managed to do all this while having many other responsibilities in the city, a dayan on the Bezdin, a Rebbe for a period of time in the Philadelphia Yeshiva, and so on and so forth. So let me, if I may, Rabbi Levine, ask you a question or two about your relationship with your amazing grandfather, Rav Aryeh Levin. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about that relationship. Maybe you have a favorite memory of being with your Zayda, and how do you feel that, having studied with and lived with, sleeping in the same room with Rav Aryeh, how did that impact your rabbinate?
Actually, thank you for your wonderful introduction. I guess we can discount most of the hyperbole, but I thank you. Your kindness overcomes all bounds. It's extremely difficult for me, and it has been difficult over the years to even speak about, my relationship with my Zayda. I was at the time 15 years old when my parents sent me back to Eretz Yisrael. I grew up in America, first in England. I came to America when I was 4, and from the age of 4 until 15, I lived in America, in Seattle, in Cleveland, in Jersey City. And then my parents sent me to Eretz Yisrael, which a lot of parents did not do in those days. It wasn't the norm to send children to Eretz Yisrael. The long way, airplanes were not jet yet. It was still in the era of propeller-driven planes, and it took a long time to get there. And it was not the normal thing to do in those days. But I went to my Zayda. I'll just briefly tell you this. I will never forget when I first saw my Zayda. We walked up that little street that's now today called Rabbi Avraham, that is right off of Rabbi Grizim, which is a small street, but it's bigger than Rabbi Avraham. And the streets are sort of tiered; they go down in level. And my Zayda was coming from the other side, and I was coming up. And suddenly he saw me, and he had something in his hand. I remember he dropped it, and he ran. I saw this old man, the long white beard. They started running. He ran over to me and he started hugging me and kissing me. I was really shocked by the whole display of such wondrous emotion. I was frightened to even meet him. I had heard such wonderful things. He was the most approachable person that you ever met. You were with him for a few moments, and you felt that you knew him your whole lifetime. You could pour out your soul to him. It's very interesting because I read in one of his books, many books that have been written about him, Reb Simcha Cook, who was an enical of the Rav of the Rav Aryeh Zeichet Tzaddik Levracha, the Riyah. He said the following quote. He said, when he first met my Zayd, he was a little boy in Eitz Chaim Yeshiva, and he couldn't get over it. He said, this old rabbi, this great rabbi came over, and he stood before them, and he said to them, my Korim li Aryeh, they call me Aryeh. Nobody ever talked like that before. No rabbi said, they call me Aryeh, my name is Aryeh. It made a tremendous impression. That's how he was. And it's a beginning insight into the whole relationship that I really found with him in the time that I was with him in Eretz Yisrael, and I stayed with him and lived with him and learned. We had a Seder together. We went every night to Mincha Mayev together, where he gave a shiur in Knesset Yisrael to Balabatim on Masechta Gittin. I got more out of that shiur that I got from some of the Rosh Hashivas who were very great and wonderful. It was just a wondrous experience to be together with him. I once said over this, I'm taking much time on one question, but it'll go where it goes. The Ramban, in the Igeres Ramban, tells us that a person should never aggrandize himself with his wisdom, with his strength, with his abilities of any sort, because all of those come from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Everything comes from the Eibishter. And thanks is to the Rebbeinu Shalom for the wisdom, the chacham, we call gifts of God. God gives it to us. He says, and therefore anybody who says it's my wisdom or my seichel or my strength or my expertise is a balgaiva, is arrogant, and he's taking the robe of the melech kaviyachol of the entire universe. That belongs to God. Honor belongs to God. So then, why do we praise people? Why do we say Shlomo HaMelech with the Chacham Mikol Adam? He was the wisest of all men. His wisdom didn't belong to him; it was God's wisdom, and it's testified to that in Tanakh. God gave him the wisdom. The secret, and that's a tremendous Chachma in of itself. The secret is that was not Shlomo's Chachma, that he had Chachma. God gave it to him. His secret was that he knew what to choose. Because that is the one gift that is particularly our own. God gave us the greatest gift. And that is a gift for which we ourselves take credit. Only we. And therefore we have to stand really in security for that gift. If we mess it up, it's our own. It's on us. And that's the gift of choice. Free will, the ability to choose. The Chachma of Shlomo, why he was the wisest of men, was not because he was wise. It's because he was perceptive enough to understand that wisdom is the greatest of gifts. And that's a wonderful, wonderful lesson for us all. Choice. That is what we live and die on choice. And that's what I learned from my Zayda. Choice. Make the right choices is the most important thing in life. To make the right choice. God gave us the ability to choose, but God also, Kaviyachal, his great chesed, his kindness, gives us a great hint at how to choose. Not only did he give us the wonderful secret of life eternal, and joy eternal, fulfillment eternal. But also he gave us the ability to choose and a hint in how to do that. We choose by following the bent of what is needed. I learned that from Zayda. My father, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, my dear beloved father of blessed memory, wrote an article about my Zayda after he passed away. And he said, what was it about your father that was so special? So he said to him the following. He said, my father never liked new things. He would wear new things. He would have a new suit. It bothered him. He didn't want to wear new things. He always liked old things. And I once asked him, why, Zayda? Why is it that you make a shekel? You don't want a new thing. Everyone liked you. He said, new things, you always have to worry about making them dirty, about spoiling them, about making them old. But old things and spoiled things, you're always involved in making them better and finer. My Zayda's choices were always about making things better and finer. That's such an important choice. My Zayda would look at things and say, how can I fill this need? How can I make this person happier? How can I fulfill this thing which is lacking? It was always positive, and it was always looking at what was needed to fulfill rather than fulfilling what some person feels is needed. That's what most people look at. And that was a wondrous thing. When there were no people visiting the jails, my Zayda visited jails because there was no one seeing to the prisoners, and they are people too. And that was another one of the basic pillars of my Zayda's belief in life. You have tremendous respect for others, and you don't look for COVID yourself. Right? When you look for COVID yourself, you get COVID. When you look for respect for others, then you get kavod. That's the difference. So this is what he always looked for. Respect for every human being. Every human being in the world is deserving of respect. We're all Eibishter's kinder. And the Rambam himself says in the Igeres, that he writes it. Beautiful letter, beautiful statement the Rambam makes about everybody being a child of the Rabbani Shalom. Not only Yidden, but everybody. Every human being, everything in the world, product of the Eibishter, and you have to be machav of it. You have to treat it with respect. We don't judge people. That's the Eibishter's job. What we do is we judge acts and approaches to life. We judge institutions, but we don't judge individuals. That belongs to God. We don't chas v'sholom take God's work lightly. That's his work that belongs to him. So these are the things I learned from him. I learned to be a kind person. I learned to take everybody as important and meaningful and someone that I could learn from. I learned to not take myself so seriously, but to take those around me extremely seriously. I learned not to look for my needs all the time, but to look for the needs of others and how to fill them. These were lessons. I don't know how well I learned them. That's for you to say. That's not for me to say. But I did learn those lessons. Those were the lessons that were taught. And I heard them well. And believe me, I will have to own up for not fulfilling them. It doesn't make it easier, but it makes it a lot more fascinating and much, much more wonderful. So I just will give you this little story and to illustrate the point. My Zayda decided one week that we would learn Musar in the yeshiva. They said 15 minutes, 20 minutes every day, we're going to learn Musar. It was not a specific Musarist, but he loved me. A Musar, and he would learn in some of the yeshivas where that was de rigueur at the time. So he gave out Musas for him to all the Bachrim. The Bachrim in my alma mater, Beis Aryeh, where I learned, Rav Lezer Plachinsky, Zechat Tzaddik Levacha, my uncle, Einikol of the Alter from Slavatka, the big Talmud Chacham and a guy in Zechat Tzaddik Levacha, husband of my Zayda's youngest daughter, Ethel, Rebbetzin Ethel. He gave out Svarim. He had old books. They didn't have new Svarim in there then. In the early 1950s, it wasn't. They had a few old Svarim. So, of course, the older Bachrim who were there at the yeshiva, there were many of them great Talmudei Chachamim. I was there nepotism because I was an Einikol. I was the youngest one. So they gave out Svarim. So, of course, the older ones, they got the first pick, and they got Misilas Yeshorim, Orches Tzaddikim, the famous Toivus Halavavos, the famous Musas Svarim. I was left with one little sefer that was left, and it didn't have any covers. I said, but Zayda, I said, it's Sotishkin Kabbalah. It doesn't have any covers. You know what my Zayda said? My kind, he said, my child, he said, hey, that's a challenge to you. Mach for them Tovla and make covers for them. You know, I have been making covers for this little book for the past 70 years. And as I kept making covers, I improved. Until finally, I learned how to bind books. And I learned how to make really nice leather covers. This is the final product. But I had this book with me all the years. It has words of my Zaydas inside. He's written in it. And it says lovely things about Gan Eden and about how to achieve Yeder Welt. And it was a sefer that nobody else had. And as a result, I found that all the Bachrim, when they finished the regular Svarim that others had, they would come up and say, "Love is under sefer, but the Zayda, there you go. Let me see this little sefer." I still have it until the present day. Here it is, very special. And that's a simon of the kind of thing my Zayda said. My Zayda told me, when I was 20 years old, I brought my tefillin back that he had bought for me as a child to be checked. And they checked the tefillin. It didn't have to be checked because the person who made them, the sefer, promised that they would remain lo'olam va'ed. It's an amazing thing. There was special tefillin my Zayda made for us at the time when I was born. And the covers of the tefillin, of the batim, were already worn out. And you know how they were made in those days of cardboard, so they tore off. I asked him, maybe I could get some new covers. He brought them back to me, and the tefillin were perfect, but the covers were the same covers. But he had stuck them together with sticky paper and with other things, and they were just what we would call in Yiddish gelatavet. He put little patches on them here and there so that they held. And so I said, but Zayda, these are the old ones. He said, but they're still good. Mackenzie noch nitzen. Do you know that until the present day, I have fixed those covers 1,000 times, and each time better than the other. Now they're really good. I finally gotten them right. Over all the years, I've never changed the covers. That's what I learned from my Zayda. To pick the right choices, to honor that great gift. And I really thank you for those lessons.
Thank you for that tremendous perspective, and so important to learn to maybe not take ourselves so seriously, but to take others seriously. And for those who don't know Rabbi Levine personally, certainly one of his many hallmarks is his enormous Avas Yisrael. He's such an Ohev Yisrael. He loves people so much that sometimes it overshadows so many of his other skills and talents. Rabbi Levine is a guy and a lamdan and a paisik and a Talmud Chacham and all of those things. But Rabbi Levine has a title that no other person in the world has. And I have to say that I was proud to know that he had this title when I was asked about it talk about small streets, on a small street in the old section of Yerushalayim. Somebody, I don't know, I was talking to somebody, and an elderly gentleman walked by, and somehow something about Philadelphia came out of my mouth, and this elderly gentleman said, Atami Philadelphia? So I said, Ken? I said, yes. He said, Tagidli, tell me, Ata makir et Hashem Harishon? Do you know the first name? Rabbi Levine has, in part of the many titles which he deserves, is Hashem Harishon, the first name. What does that mean? And Rabbi Levine, correct me if I've gotten some of the details wrong, but if I remember the story correctly, that Rabbi Levine's mother was 8 months pregnant when a bomb exploded in a square very close to their apartment. And as a result of which, she went into a deep state of shock. And doctors were concerned about her life and certainly about the life of her unborn child. And Rabbi Levine's father, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kosher L'Vrach L'Chaim Haba, was davening and davening and davening, and he must have dozed off. And in his dream, he saw Rav Kook Zatzal, and Rav Kook was wearing the clothing that he would wear when he would visit people. And Rabbi Levine asked him, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to be Mevaker Chola." And Rabbi Levine said to him, "Will my wife be all right? And will she have the baby?" And he said, "Yes, and I will be at the bris." And Rabbi Levine was so excited about this that he told his wife, and immediately she got up and she recovered from her illness. And at the time of Rabbi Levine's birth, so Rabbi Levine was given the name for Rav Kook Zatzal, and he was the first one. So Rabbi Levine is Hashem Harishon. So I'm wondering, Rabbi Levine, today, one of the things when people talk about Israel, so often it's about the divide between the religious and the secular. And very often, a lot of it is very, very ugly. There was a major article in today's New York Times, which had, let's put it this way, a very less than complimentary description about one of the Gedolei Yisrael. And I'm wondering, having been in Israel in the early years of Hakamat HaMedina, and having had the exposure that you had to such greats as Reb Lezer Pluchensky, your other uncle, Reb Elyashiv, Reb Zalman Meltzer, to whom you used to bring his milk every day. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about them, about their attitude, your grandfather's attitude to the Medina, to other Jewish people, and maybe what we could learn in our own time as ways of bridging the gaps, if you will, of fostering a greater sense of Avos Yisrael.
Thank you. They were so much above these types of swamps that we wallow in daily, and that the media wallows in, that all of us are involved with in this Meshuggah world that we live in. They weren't a part of this world. I remember going every day to Rabbi Zalman, was my tzaddik and my bris, a great tzaddik. And I'm just looking at him, and when you looked at him, you can see some of it in the picture of him, but when you saw him in person, they were B'nai Olam Haba. They were not of this kind of a world. They didn't belong in this world. They were in the world of Torah, and were in their own world. And it was a beautiful world. It was the real world. Olam, Bari, Raisi. I just saw the real world. It's amazing to see the real world through the eyes of such tzaddikim. That's the only way you really see it, is through the eyes of people who have their eyes constantly in a different world, on a different world, are looking in a different way. Those are Jewish eyes. We don't look at the world through politics. We never looked at the world through political parties. My Bzaid used to call it ha-politika ha'arura. They curse politics. You look at the world through each and every individual, and through the eyes that the Eibishter has given us, the eyes of kindness and goodness. You don't think about where the world is going to. You think about where the world is coming from and where you should bring it to. It's not about running away from or fighting against so-and-so. It's about elevating and where you are going to and what you are going to become. Totally different orientation. I know from all of them, I just remember, the little memories come back. My Zeta called me into his room one day, And he was sitting there, and there was a whole bunch of letters on the table. And he was going through files of letters that he had with so many people. He was a tremendous correspondent and a beautiful handwriting, and he wrote to people all over the world. Many letters with an ink pen that he dipped into ink, and he wrote on the back of the pen, so it came out very, very thin. Tiny little letters, beautiful, clear letters. And he started to show me letters from historical people. I remember particularly, he showed me all the letters that he received from Achim Meir, who was a mayor in Yerushalayim. He was a mayor in one of the towns. And he had been violently against religious people, so they said. And I read the letters, and it was a man that was expressing love for this old rabbi, filled with love, filled with respect, filled with love. And I said, say that. I said, everybody knows this is man. He fought against Fruma Yidden. You know what my Zayda said to me? This was his reply to me. He said, Ich weiß nicht, aber mir was ich getan. So as in deutsche Gein sein in seine Eigen. I don't know what I did to find such favor in his eyes. He was the man that I would sit in, we talk about it, and this nugget to Yiddishkeit, and here he shows his love for this old rabbi. And this rabbi is saying about him, I don't know what I did to curry such favor that he was so accepting of me. What an amazing outlook. That's totally different than people would think. When Motzei stood before any human being, he looked upon him as another creation of the Rabboni Shalom. I remember that they even said, they came and gave him regards from Jacques Chastel when he was the Premier of France. And I remember one of the generals of France came, and he asked specifically to meet with Motzei. And all of them went away. They had a tremendous impression. I remember when Ben Gurion, you heard all the things Motzei did. He wanted to have an audience with Motzei. He wanted to meet Motzei. So he came to meet Motzei, Ben Gurion. And everybody said, what are you going to say to Ben Gurion? He's a pray for Beker. He's a boy. He's yeah. You know, he was. And he was. What is Motzei going to say to Ben Gurion? Motzei listened carefully to what he said. And then you know what he said to him? He said the following to him. He said, it's the custom that when you see another Yid to give him a bracha. He said, I want to give you a bracha. I can imagine what it would say in the papers the next day. Rabbi Avraham Levene gives bracha to Ben Gurion. Why can't he give him a bracha? So he said, you are the head of the Memshala of Yisrael, he said. I hope and pray, he says, for you, that you will speedily be able to give your Melucha and Malchus over to Mashiach Tzidkenu, of your Meinu. Amen. Even with him, he came up with a bracha. That was very fitting and apt, but didn't say anything negative, but didn't in any way lessen his emunah and his faith. It's a tremendous lesson in that. And I'll tell you what that is. When I came here, I knew a lot of the conservative rabbis and the reform rabbis of the area, and I never went into the shuls because I don't agree with the institutions that are outside of Yiddishkeit. Outside of, in other words, the Yiddishkeit that I know, which is the Yiddishkeit of Torah and Moshe and Eibishter Kaviyachol. That's what I know, one Yiddishkeit. So I would never go into those institutions. But over the years, I became very friendly with a lot of these people, and they came to my shul from time to time, and they would call me, and we would be very friendly. And I would tell them, I won't go to you, but I will be your friend as a person. I like you. You're as good as you're better. I'm not better than you. And the Eibishter decides who is good and who is not good. This is not a contest. We all should fulfill ourselves, and we're all good. I said, what I am trying to do is to push what I believe is right. And friendship means you respect me and I respect you. I respect you as a human being, that you make your choices, you have the right to do so. But I don't have to agree with those choices. But I certainly will not demean or lessen my choice and what I believe in order to buy your friendship. That's buying. And that we don't do. We keep sacred what is to us, and we don't judge Yenim. And that's an extremely important rule. It helps you to get along with everybody, because I'm not in the judgment seat. I'm in the catbird seat. I'm the one who is doing what the Eibishter wants me to do, and I'm trying to do it. For that, I will answer when I am deficient. But to judge, no, sir. So this is very, very important to me. I think that a lot of the tzoros in Eretz Yisrael, my brother dedicated his life to do that in Gesher, to try and explain to people that this is an individual matter, and it has to do with an individual's status in gaive, or in arrogance, or in kindness, or in goodness, but it has nothing to do with the attitude towards life, and towards the Rabbanei Shalom, and towards kindness, and towards others. And that is something that should always be shown in full and complete and loving measure, and to try and fulfill the need of anybody that you see before you, not to say what they are lacking, but to say, what do they need? How can I fill it? And that's a very, very important rule.
Thank you so much for that tremendously important perspective, which is seemingly too lacking in our time. As I mentioned before, Baruch Hashem, today our shul, certainly BC before COVID, was a hopping place. Baruch Hashem, we have hundreds and hundreds of families, such a wide spectrum, really, from atheists to Haredim and everything in between. And you managed, with your Rebbitzin, to do a magisterial job of building it up in an environment which was somewhere on the spectrum of not being hospitable to being outright hostile. I'm wondering if you could discuss how you managed to do it, some of the joys and the successes, and also perhaps some of the challenges that came along the way.
Well, I will tell you, you told me BC, I'll tell you AD. All delightful. Everything that I experienced in this shul was delightful, especially in retrospect. There may have been some minor irritations along the way, but I don't remember any of them for some reason. They all escaped me. I don't remember ever having a different opinion with anyone. I did, but I don't remember. And the reason is very simply because the differences were always in matters of my job, of trying to do my job as an honest Rav and trying to do the Eibishter's work. But in terms of personalities, AD, all delightful. I came to a little shul with a few people, and everybody said, you're going to a strange shul. They're all scientists and professors and ayin and aher. And there were many less people than even they said there were. And there weren't any Orthodox shuls in the area, community shuls. There were a few Rabbanim that had been very competent, that had their own shuls or their own minyanim, but there wasn't a single community Orthodox shul in the entire area. This was the first one. Everyone should remember this. The mother of shuls in the West Philadelphia area, Merion, is the Lower Merion Synagogue, and it's a wonderful synagogue because the Balabatim all decided in the early 1950s that they wanted to have an Orthodox shul. Nobody heard of that at that point. A community synagogue, everybody thought it was ridiculous. When one of my members at the time, he was a visitor actually, he came to the shul and he had davened with us over Shabbos. He said, what are you trying to do here, Rabbi? There's not very many people here. What are you trying to do? I said, we're going to build an Orthodox shul here. He said, and a community, he said, Rabbi Levine, grass will grow on your face. He quoted Rabbi Akiva in the Gemara that said, before the Beis HaMikdash will be restored, grass will grow on your face. You'll have a beard of grass. At the dedication of our shul, the first building that we built, this man was present. I said to him, did you bring your lawnmower? I need a trim. And we both laughed. He said, I didn't believe it could be done. Why? How? It was the Eibishter's chesed. Somehow he helped us along. It was my Zayda, my Zayda. I tried to think of what everybody needed. What was lacking? It was for the young people. I saw for the children was lacking a rabbi to take them on his lap on Shabbos, to lead them to their parents when they were lost, to wipe a tear away, to give a lollipop, to give them an impression of the sweetness and the love that there is in the world, because that's very important. Kindness and menschlichkeit are very important, especially when you teach children. There was a young man that was in my shul, and Nebuch, his parents were amongst the first people to ever get a divorce. The young couple was very sad. And he stopped coming up to me on Shabbos. And one Shabbos, I said to him, why did he stop coming up to me? So he said to me, because he said, I am embarrassed. And when did I hear this story? I heard this story 25 years later when I went to meet him. When I happened to meet him at an occasion, he told me this. He said, I was embarrassed, I said, to come up. I didn't remember. But he told me, he said, I felt I was out of place, he said. And then when I went up to you, you said, embarrassed? What do you mean? He said, where am I supposed to sit? I don't know whom to sit next to. I don't want to sit next to a strange man. He said, with other people's children. He said, I don't know where to sit, and people laugh at me, and I don't want to come in. He said, what are you talking about? Your seat is next to me. I remember him saying that. But he said, okay. And he came up every Shabbos. He said, you brought me back into the shul. Everybody said, that's a little boy that's just near the rabbi on Shabbos. He was so excited. Another man told me a story. It was an amazing story. I don't even remember them. He said, I joined a shul. You were a little shul in an old building, and I came into the building. And you were giving it Russia, and everybody was listening, and I had my son with me. He was a little kid. And he kept running in and out, and you didn't say anything. And then he ran into the shul. And he started jumping up and down. And I said to him, stop it. He said, but Daddy, I have to go to the potty. Everybody was shocked, and I was furious, and that's how you behave in the shul. And you know what happened? You said, I didn't remember this at all. He said, you said, okay, that's a very important thing when a child says that. And you went down from the bima in the middle of your drasha, and you took him and escorted him into the bathroom. He said, that's when I decided to become a member of your shul. You know, you look at the moment of what people need. There's so many of the important things that people talk about, and the Koban, and the Derech Eretz, and all of that. But the Derech Eretz for the needs of a person is I think, paramount. And that's what you look for. There were a lot of older people. Older people feel left out of things. And I tried very hard to give the older people a sense of belonging with the younger people, that they were a part of it. There were European people, and there were people from other countries, and they all had their own minhag. I went with the point that each and every person has to follow the meaning of their avos, because they're precious to them. And if they don't know, they should try and learn them. I encourage a Sephardic communion. I encourage the women who really sincerely wanted to daven when we didn't have an Erev by making two minyan, by making an earlier minyan so they could daven and the husband could stay with the children too. I tried to fill, insofar as I could, the needs of everyone. I just want to say one thing. I don't know when we'll run out of time, but I have to say this. It's very important to me. I'll tell you a secret. I did not take part in any way in the selection of the new rabbi of the synagogue. When it came the point to select the new rabbi of the synagogue, I refused to take part. And I said it was because I didn't want to spoil. It was partially true. I didn't want them to be tagged as my follower or a continuation of my rabbinate or any of that nonsense that people do. I didn't want any part of that. They should, everybody stands on his own 2 feet, and they should be judged according to who they are. So I refused to take part, and that was the reason I gave. But there was another reason that I gave that was personal, and I'm telling it to you now. I'm sharing with you a secret. I had a test in mind. I said, Rabbi Shalom, sometimes maybe I didn't do the right thing. Maybe it was personal. Maybe I did it because I had negias in it. I had involvements, personal involvements. You never know these things. And we're all amenable to such faults. I said, I will make a test. This is my test. I will see. I will not take part in any way in the selection of the new rabbi. And I will see who they select. If they select someone who messes up all the work of 40 years, not really my work, the Eberster's gift. I said, then, well, I'll feel that I better re-examine myself and think about it in the years remaining. But I'll feel very wonderful if they have been brought to a stage where they realize what it is that makes a shul and what makes a good rabbi. And the sign of this will be who they pick. And one day, sure enough, they'll walk through the door, Rabbi and Rabbi Shmidman. Oh my goodness. What a blessing to me that was on that wonderful day. Excuse me. It was a bracha. It was a bracha. If I could have created the kind of a Rav that I would want it to be there, much better than I, that's what I would have picked. That would have been my Rav. I saw the Rebbitzin. My goodness. OU people, OU. I hope we don't say OU. You are so lucky to have this lady. It's Rebbitzin Adina that you have. You were fortunate. You must have been doing the right thing to pick her as one of your stars. Her grandfather was my homiletics teacher in Torah Das. And what wonderful parents, what a wonderful person she herself is in so many wonderful ways. Now I will say to you, as we're on this subject, I'll go off on a branch. None of the above or anything in life could ever be done by any Rav without having a Rebbitzin that is on board 150%. Baruch Hashem, I was able to know this firsthand. This I was blessed. To have a Rebbitzin who was with me at every step of the way. It was my Zayda's bracha. When my Zayda first met my wife Chana, who was at the time a young girl, she wasn't 20 yet, and he looked at her, he began to cry. And my uncle, Rabbi Foel Zechet Tzaddik Levacha, said, "What's weinst du, Zayda? Why are you crying?" When he looked at Chana, he said, she reminds me of the mama. So like you're my Baba Chana. He looked at her and he saw in her my Baba Chana. She was. She has been and she will be a Mitzvah. All the years together, it was because of her. So I know what a Rebbitzin is. Believe me, I had first-hand training in Rebbitzin-hood. I know what a Rebbitzin is. And when Rabbi Shmidman came in, and I met his Rebbitzin, I said, Baruch Hashem, my Zayda's lessons are very good ones. I am giving the shul over into better hands than it's been in. What could I ask for more? I passed the test. Baruch Hashem. Thank you.
I know we're probably technically over time, so I'm not going to go on with further lines of questioning, although I have deep temptation to do so. But Rabbi Levine, I have to thank you. You went well above and over and beyond. You were way magzim about me, although not about my Rebbitzin. And I will say that when I was interviewed,
at least that much I got in. At least that much.
when I was interviewed for the position, and they asked me, "What is your greatest asset?" I, without hesitation, said, my Rebbitzin, right. Which was not only truthful, but
and so you should always say, "Is 120."
But I just before we close, I want to leave everybody with, although there are many, but I want to leave you with one beautiful story about our treasured Rabbi Levine. When I came to the shul, there were people who said, "Aren't you nervous that the Rabbi Emeritus, who's been here for 40 years, who's the Anikel of Rabbi Avraham Levine, whose father was the great Rabbi Chaim Yaakov, that he's going to still be living here with his Rebbitzin. That's got to be so intimidating. How is that gonna work? So I said, I'm actually excited about it. It's the best gift that any Rav could have. And I'll tell you, that first year before Rosh Hashanah, so I was going to blow shofar. So one of the roles of the rabbi is to be in charge of the religious services of the shul. So I had to pick a makre, somebody who would call out tekiah, shvarim, teruah. So I did what I thought was the natural thing. And I went over to Rabbi Levine and I asked him, I said, would you please do me the favor of being the makre? You'll be in shul. And Rabbi Levine looked at me and he said, no. And I was a little bit crestfallen. I was like, why not? You're going to be in shul anyway. You'll be involved in the davening. And he looked at me. He said, I could never do that because then I would have to correct my Rav, and I could never do that. It bespeaks the enormous humility and sensitivity and Avos Yisrael that is the hallmark of Rabbi and Rabbi Levine, and helps to explain how they built up our tremendous community. I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
I want to thank Rabbi David Pardo and the OU for the opportunity, and I look forward to gathering with all of you in person to schmooze for a very long time without all the limitations of Zoom.
Thank you.
Hey, I want to thank you both. This has been exceptional and is going to be incredibly hard to top or match ever. But for those of you who are new here first time, please join us next week. Same great time, same great place, ou.org/conversations, 8:15 p.m. Next week, we're going to the Frozen Chosen, the Great White North, Rabbi Rafi Lipner, our first international speaker from Toronto, from Shari Tzvila. It's going to be a great time. My deep thanks to both of the LSDs, sorry, to Rabbi Shmidman, Rabbi Levine. This has been an incredible,
Thank you, Rabbi.
an incredible evening. Thank you. Shavua Tov.
Thank you, everybody.
Shavuot
Love you all.
you.
Joy to see you all,
We
your
love
wonderful
you.
faces.
So
Wonderful faces.
wonderful,
Oh,
so
my
wonderful
goodness.
to see you.
Best television I ever watched. Wonderful.
Hey,
You should
Shavuot
all be
Tov,
on my
Rabbi
television
Levine.
set. I never changed the channel.
Shavuot Tov.
I never changed. Mayor and Linda, shalom. Ingrid, hello, Ingrid and
Hello,
This family.
Hello, Tov.
Rabbi Parlo,
Good
thank
luck,
you.
Daddy.
Thank
Good
you.
luck, Daddy.
Masha, thank you. Good luck, sweetheart.
Rabbi
Wonderful
Levine,
to see you. I'm
Gitaro.
glad you're there. I miss you. Ephraim, what a joy to see you. And Emily, hello. Rachel, the nicknames, hello. Pomerantz is Besnik, what a joy to see you.
What a joy.
Ruth
What
Aller,
a joy to see you.
wonderful face. Israel,
See you.
shalom.
Thank you very much.
Lauren, that's a great picture.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Wonderful,
you.
bro.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Don't go.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Be well.
Shavuot Tov,
I
Rabbi.
love you.
Shavuot Tov, Rabbi
Sei
Levine.
gesund, Rabbi
I
Levine.
leave
Sei
you
gesund.
all too.
Amen,
Thank
amen,
you.
amen.
All of you.